let's get started. Welcome everyone to Advanced Flight Planning with ForeFlight Dispatch. In this webinar, we're going to walk through the basics of ForeFlight Dispatch and show you how it can help your team collaboratively plan, file, support, and monitor flights. Let's go ahead and meet our presenters for today. Caitlin and Josh, tell us about yourselves.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Galloway. I am the product manager for Dispatch. I'm a private pilot and I've been at ForeFlight since 2015.
Thanks, Caitlin. I'm Josh Pava. I've been at ForeFlight for about 4.5 years now. I'm the QA lead for ForeFlight Dispatch. In addition to my duties within ForeFlight, I also fly professionally on a Gulfstream G450 on a worldwide operation.
Thanks, guys. On the agenda for today, we'll start with an overview of ForeFlight Dispatch, what it does, and how it fits into the ForeFlight product ecosystem, how it works seamlessly with ForeFlight Mobile, and how third-party integrations make planning simpler than ever. Caitlin will then take us into the flights list, which is the main view of ForeFlight Dispatch and allows for collaboration across your organization. She'll demonstrate its capabilities using 2 example flights planned using Dispatch. The first will be a transatlantic flight from Washington to Copenhagen, and following that, she'll plan an EMEA flight from Copenhagen to Dubai. And after that, we'll wrap up with some Q&A. But before we begin, I want to mention you can ask questions during today's webinar using the GoToWebinar message panel on the right side of your screen. We'll respond to as many questions in writing as we can during today's presentation, and we'll also take a few of the more popular questions that come in and ask them live at the end. I will say it's a good idea to submit your questions as soon as you think of them. As we get toward the end of webinars, the number of questions tends to go up, which makes it harder to respond to everyone. If you encounter any audio or other technical problems during today's webinar, first try leaving and rejoining the webinar. And if that doesn't work, if you're using a mobile device, try switching to a computer. We found that computers tend to have fewer problems with the GoToWebinar platform. And lastly, today's webinar is being recorded and will be accessible at foreflight.com/webinars by this time tomorrow. So with that, let's get started. What is ForeFlight Dispatch? Well, to put it in a sentence, ForeFlight Dispatch is a powerful component of ForeFlight Web that delivers next-generation, multi-user, scheduled and mobile flight planning, resulting in greater efficiency and productivity for flight departments of any size. So there's a lot there in that sentence. Let's break it down a little bit. First, we have the team flight planning aspect. One of the great things about Dispatch is that it enables really collaborative flight planning. So flight planners, dispatchers, schedulers, and even your pilots can all collaborate on the same platform and view a summary of all active, planned, filed, and completed flights all in one place. So what you're seeing here is the flights view. Caitlin will show us how this works in just a few minutes. We support integrations with many of the most popular scheduling systems. What that allows you to do is, every time you schedule a new flight, that flight is automatically imported into Dispatch with all of its basic details so that flight planners can start working on it right away. Next, we also have a powerful trip support integration. Currently, we integrate with 3 of the most popular flight service providers: Jeppesen ITPS, Honeywell Forge, and UAS International Trip Support. What this does is allow authorized trip support personnel to access your Dispatch instance just as if they were part of your account. Now, this is a really great way to get support from third-party vendors when using Dispatch. Next, we have the integration with ForeFlight Mobile, which is one of the most essential parts of Dispatch and helps unite your entire flight department. What this means is that when a flight planner's finished planning the flight, filing it, however far they want to go with it, they can release that flight to assigned crew members, like you can see here. And that flight will appear within ForeFlight. That way the crew can go ahead and begin reviewing any documents attached to the flight, whether that's a briefing or a nav log, or anything added by planners or trip support personnel. It's also possible to control whether pilots will have the ability to edit the flight plan. That's something Caitlin will show us shortly. And lastly, the central component of Dispatch that doesn't relate to any of its outside integrations is the advanced flight planning that it supports. It goes above and beyond what ForeFlight Mobile can do on its own. It takes the app and adds in a lot of advanced capabilities like ETP and ETOPS, EAPIS, very complex route constraints, and many more capabilities to support a wide range of flight planning needs. And before I hand it over to Caitlin and Josh, I just want to show how ForeFlight Dispatch fits into the ForeFlight ecosystem. We have Dispatch here in the middle with our scheduling provider on the left, our trip support provider at the bottom supporting your planners and whatever they may need, and ForeFlight Mobile on the right, so planners can release flight plans to pilots right in ForeFlight Mobile. Now, this has been a broad overview of dispatch, but for today's demonstration, to get a look at its full capabilities, I'm going to hand it over to Caitlin and Josh.
Thanks, Jay. So where we're going to start is the dispatch tab. When you first open up the dispatch tab, you're going to see this flights list that we're looking at here. As we mentioned, we can integrate with scheduling systems. So if you have a scheduling integration, you are going to have these flights already filled in. And there's quite a few different ways that you can filter these flights. The first way is by the filing status of the flight. You can also set a custom time frame. Another way that you can filter this list is by who created the flight. So whether it came from scheduling, whether someone created it manually in dispatch, the pilot created it on their device, or if a service provider came in and planned for you as well. Over here on the right, we have watch list and search, and depending on what I'm doing, I might use these together. Watch list is really great for setting kind of a default view on your personal screen. So if there's certain items you always want to keep track of and always have filtered, the watch list is great for that. So maybe I always want to keep an eye on flights at Teterboro. Now it's only going to show me flights with that airport, either in the departure or the destination. If I just want to look for something really quick, I can use search. I could also look for maybe a tail number. And now it's filtered that list down again. To the right of each flight, we have the edit button, which will allow us to go into the flight and modify it. We also have the more button. So we can just do some quick actions here. We can file the flight plan, delete it, and grab some relevant documents. One other thing I want to mention here on the flights list is the tags. So we do have this tag column, and you can just click right here, edit tags. This is really helpful if you are planning with trip IDs, but really you can use this any way that you want to. If you want to add your own custom labels, and if you want to get even more specific with certain colors, hyperlinks, we do have this little tag tips here. We can show you how to create those. So from here, I'm just going to create a new flight from scratch so we can walk through the entire workflow. So I'll click New Flight at the top left. And the first thing I'm going to choose is my aircraft. So I've already got the Challenger 650 that I want to plan with today, but I can see all of my dispatch licensed tails in this list. And I can also see what features they have on each tail. So I can see that this one has runway analysis, it has weight and balance configured, and it has fuel advisor. For our first leg today, we're going to go from Washington Dulles to Copenhagen. If I don't know the identifier, I can just type city name, airport name, and we're going to come up with some suggestions for you. If I want to get even more information, I can click on the info button, and I can see the METAR, TAF, some new tabs that we've recently added, which is the MOS and daily weather that you're used to seeing in ForeFlight Mobile. And I can always go to the airport page as well. What we're going to be seeing here is your AFD information, procedures, operating hours, just general information about the airport. If we go down to the procedures section here, we recently added a new capability, which is that you can now view Jeppesen procedures on the web. So I can just click right here and take a look at that Jeppesen approach. So we'll go back to the main flight planning page. And I'll go ahead and leave the date for today, and maybe I'll plan just a couple hours out. If I want to, I can add a call sign, and then I can choose some alternates. So I can see some nearby alternates, and I can see the longest runway and the distance from my destination. If I want to, I can also choose a second alternate and a takeoff alternate. Since we are flying into Europe, we are definitely going to need to do some alternate routing. So we can open up this section here, and we have an auto option where we can automatically suggest alternate routing for you. Or you can choose a manual option, and you can also choose an alternate cruise profile. Moving down to the fuel section, you may have noticed we've got a warning here that our total fuel required exceeds our total tank capacity. So there's a few ways that we might adjust our flight plan to make this work for us. The first thing I'm going to do is take a look at the performance profiles. So here we've got the manufacturer published profiles. We've got climb, cruise, and descent. And I'll go ahead and choose 7.4. And we can see that error goes away. If you're not exactly sure which one to choose, you can click on the cruise advisor, and you can compare up to 3 cruise profiles at a time. What we're going to show you here is your best time and your best fuel. So 7.4 was definitely the right choice. Moving along in the fuel section, we can change the taxi fuel. We can also choose a fuel policy. I'll go ahead and plan with min fuel required. And then we can also choose an FBO. Then I'm going to open up the advanced fuel options. And the first thing that we can choose here is a reserve policy. So it makes sense that we're probably going to fly EASA commercial because we are flying into Europe. But you do have quite a few different reserve policy options here. And if you need to, you can set aside discretionary fuel. You can also choose different contingency policies. And you can plan your contingency fuel in minutes as well as percent.
I think what you just showed, Caitlin, that's sort of what I typically tend to run. One of the things that I do, especially with the new fuel policies of EASA, just to keep everybody happy, sometimes I'll add a little bit of discretionary fuel. And when you add discretionary fuel, not only does it show on the right side of the performance pane, but it'll also show on your nav log that's created. So in the event that you have a ramp inspection when you arrive in Europe, you're going to be able to present a nav log that has all the fuel sections that the inspector is going to be looking for. So it just looks nice and compliant, and essentially it's ready to go, ready to present.
Great, thanks, Josh. Moving down to the crew section. This piece is really important because who you choose as the crew is who's going to get all of this flight planning information released to their iPad. So I'll set myself as PIC, and then I'll add Josh as my SIC. So I'm manually typing in Josh's email because we're not on the same group account. This is something that you can do with contract pilots. And we also recently introduced a new tool in settings called the People Manager.
So yeah, Kaylin, I like to use the People Manager when I'm flying with contract pilots, or perhaps when I'm using a flight attendant that we don't normally use, because that doesn't then require them to be a member of our organization or on our account. So it allows me to still use that drop-down menu for SIC or the cabin attendant and have them pre-populate with their email address without having to type it in, but it allows it simply to be chosen right from that drop-down, and I move on with the flight assignments.
Thanks, Josh. So once I've set my crew in here, we can take a look at the simple load here. So we've already got our 2 pilots being counted in the basic operating weight. And if we want to, we could add a couple of folks here. And we could also add some cargo. So this is our simple load. This is automatically going to just fill in folks where we think that they'll fit best. But of course, you can always go to the weight and balance tab and get more specific. So if we open these up, the first thing we can do is take a look at the weight and balance profile that we have selected. So depending on the configuration options of your aircraft, how many different configurations you have, you can set those up. I'll use the 10 passenger for today. And of course, we've got the crew in the right spot, but maybe we want to move a couple of people around. We can do that. We can add an infant in the lap. And as we're making these changes, we can see the envelope change here on the right. Josh, anything you want to say about the weight and balance tab?
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. Sure. So, as you may have saw with Caitlin when she was moving around some of those, some of the occupants, we have several choices like adults, male, female, infant, child, that sort of thing that you can select. And those are standard weights that you've set up within your settings in ForeFlight Dispatch. So the weights that you've specified in settings will be what's pre-populated for those different stations. In addition, we do support curtailment. As you can see towards the top of the screen, there's the option to use standard weights. So if that's something that your operation does, it's something that we support as well.
Thanks, Josh. And yeah, just giving you a quick view of the envelope here to see what that looks like with the curtailment on. And once we're happy with this, we can generate a load manifest. And this is the same one that users are going to be able to access on mobile as well. All right. Let's go back to the flight tab here and continue scrolling down. So now that we've filled this out and we've been in the weight and balance tab, you can see that auto load is off. But if we want to make changes just right here, we can go ahead and turn auto load back on. And then you can see that we have the option to make those changes again. So you don't have to go back into the weight and balance tab unless you need to go in there.
Yeah, and we're doing this is particularly helpful is that enables the add crew button to be active. So if you're flying the aircraft with, say, more than 2 pilots, then you're able to add your 3rd or 4th crew member in this view. Whereas in the weight and balance view, you'd have to immediately put them in the passenger in the cabin. So there's just kind of 2 ways to do this. And I think for some, it's a little bit easier to do it right from this screen, and you're all set to go at that point.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Okay, so the next 2 sections that we're going to take a look at are contingency planning and routes. I personally like to choose my route first because that's going to help me better visualize my adequate airports, my ETP airports, just help me make a better choice there. So I've gone ahead and selected the recommended route. I can see that it's Eurocontrol valid. But I also have some other options here. I've got recently filed routes. Depending on where you're flying, you might also see preferred routes. So there could be quite a few different route options here. The recommended route is our routing engine. We are going to take a look at a lot of different factors: winds, temps, turbulence, what's most likely to be cleared as filed, Eurocontrol validation, aircraft performance. We're going to try to find you a time and fuel optimized route. Now that I've got my route in here, I can go back up to contingency planning. And a new feature that we just recently added is adequate airports. So I can go ahead and click in here. And if we turn on auto select, which it's already on here, the system will automatically take a look and suggest what airports might be best along your route. We do have some filtering options as well. So if you need to require a certain type of approach, towered airport, Minimum runway length is automatically in here based on your aircraft profile, but we can add those filters and see if any of these results are going to change. We do also have the option to turn off auto select, and you can customize this list and add in any airports that you would like.
So when you first load up this view, we automatically populate with the non-ETOPS range. Obviously, adequate airports are separate from ETOPS, so the logic being that the lowest range specified in the aircraft that is non-ETOPS is going to be what's chosen here. In the event that we want to override that and choose an ETOPS range, such as 120 minutes or 180 minutes, like we're showing on the screen, you can do just that here.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And I'll go ahead and leave this. Since we are going to be planning with ETOPS, I'll go ahead and leave our adequates at 60 minutes. And we can see, we've got this error here. We're not fully covered. And that's kind of an indicator for us that we need to use ETOPS. So let's go back. And I'll go ahead and just put in an ETP airport pair here. And I can check the box for ETOPS. I'll go ahead and choose 180 minutes, but again, like Josh mentioned, you can change that if you need to, depending on your flight. And of course, you can add additional ETP pairs if you need to. So if I scroll down over here, I can take a look at the map. And I can see that I'm fully covered. We've also got labels on these now, so you can see that the green ring is 180 minutes and the blue rings are 60 minutes. And I can, if I went back into adequate airports as well, I could see that error is gone. I'm totally covered. One other thing we've recently added in the contingency section is a point of safe diversion. So this works really similarly to point of safe return, which we've already had in the system, but you have the ability now to choose a different airport than your departure airport as your diversion. So you can go ahead and put that in, and we'll calculate that for you as well. Back in the route section, we've got a good start with our route string here. But what I would strongly recommend is that we go into the route builder, because here is a place where we can add a lot of different constraints. We've actually already got one in using our operational rules to automatically avoid this FIR. For a flight like this, I might use the via track option, and I could choose use any, or I can choose the specific track that I want to fly. And then once I do that, I can hit generate new route, and it's going to take my new constraints into consideration and everything else, and just make sure we find a new valid route. So now we've got our new Eurocontrol valid route, probably with just a few changes. And if we need to, we can also scroll down and make by leg changes. So if we click on the plus here, you have quite a few different options. If you need to change an altitude, a cruise profile, add a delay or a stay, change flight rules, there's just a ton that you can do by leg here. So you can come down here and make those changes. Let's go ahead and go back. And the last thing I want to mention on the routes section is if there's a route that you use all the time, you can go ahead and save it by clicking this save icon right here. And that will actually generate a new section in your routes anytime that you're planning between these two airports. Going back up to the top, we've already been on the weight and balance tab. Let's move over to the runway analysis tab. So in dispatch, we're actually going to automatically calculate your runway analysis. We're going to take a look at the weather, and we can automatically select a runway and engine out procedure for the best max takeoff weight. But of course, you can come in here and change anything that you need to. So the first section you'll see here is the weather. We're using the TAF. But of course, we could modify this if we have later weather. And then for configuration, this is coming straight from the aircraft profile. So those defaults are going to be what's in here, but of course you can change it. And then as we scroll down, we get to the runways for that airport. So we've automatically selected one for you, but you can definitely override it. And you can see your max takeoff weight limit, headwind, tailwind, and depending on the airport, you can also choose different engine out procedures. So you can see on this runway, for example, we have the straight out, and we also have an RNAV option. We can click on the details to get the textual description, and we can also click on the map to get a graphical view. The last thing I want to show on the runway view here is the report. So if we open this up, Josh, you want to say a little bit about this?
Yeah, sure. So this is what I refer to as a summary view. It's going to show our runway analysis results for the airports that we have selected, whether that's our takeoff, landing, alternates, etc. And going right from the top on the left-hand side of the takeoff summary, we get to see that our takeoff weight, the wind that it was calculated at, temperature, altimeter, all those things that tend to affect our performance. Right underneath the altimeter, we have the takeoff trim setting. So, of course, that's the trim setting that we are sometimes getting from a chart. Now we're basically showing it in text view right here as part of the weight and balance and runway analysis combination. So we can see that we would set the trim to 4.4 for this takeoff. And below that, we have all the settings that we basically previously have chosen from the runway analysis tab in dispatch, whether our APR is armed, NAI is rolling takeoff, TR is operating, not operating, etc. And towards the bottom of that summary, we have our V speeds, the takeoff distance that are required, and the level off height. In this case, 1,943 is our level off altitude. Very similar on the right-hand side, except it, of course, calculates for our landing data. But we still get all of the same configurations that we saw within the runway analysis view of dispatch, where we're specifying what kind of winds, temperature, altimeter, and then any components of the airplane, like our bleeds being open or closed, TR is operating, not operating, and that sort of thing. And then as we scroll down, we get to see the takeoff engine out procedure. In this case, it's a straight out procedure, so it's pretty simple, but we do get the text description there as well. And all this, of course, is accessible within your ForeFlight mobile when you're viewing it in the cockpit. And below that, we go into our basically our charts that are showing at the various different temperatures what's the maximum weight that we can go off of at each runway. So you may see things here such as structural or obstacle limited, AFM limited, that sort of thing. But we can always see what's the limiting weight for each runway at the given temperature. Then as we scroll down further, we get that for all of the runways at the departure airport. And as we continue even further down, we get our maximum landing data. So we get both factored and unfactored on the various runways. And we can see what those limits are. So if it was a shorter runway and it was runway limited, we might see a runway limit condition code here rather than a structural code that we're showing here.
Thanks, Josh. Let's move on to the ATC data tab. Here's where all of your filing related information is going to live. If you need to here, you could add remarks. This is something, depending on if you have repeating remarks, you can use an operational rule here to have this automatically filled in, like this one is here. And some little features here that we have are flight watchers. So maybe there's a dispatcher or an ops person who wants to keep an eye on a flight, but we don't want to count them as a soul on board. You can add them as a flight watcher and they'll get all the correspondence related to the flight. but they aren't being counted as being on the aircraft. We've also got dispatcher notes. So if you just need to send a message to the crew, you can put a message in here. And as we scroll down to the bottom, we can see the Afton addresses that we're sending to and the filing messages that are going to be sent. So we've got the planned flight plan here. I'll go ahead and save the flight at the bottom right here. And then I would have the option to file. Once I do actually hit that file button, I'll start getting filing messages here, my acknowledgements, any other correspondence that I need. Moving over to the Files tab. This is just a space where you can upload your own custom documents. So if there's just something that you want to make sure that that crew has information about, you can upload a lot of different file types here. Let's quickly talk about a new feature that we added on the eAPIS tab. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and choose that I'm going to do a private eAPIS, but of course we do also support commercial. And really what you're going to want to do is just kind of walk through, make sure you've got all your aircraft operator, 24/7 contact, aircraft owner, and all of the details for your crew and passengers in here. You can see we've got green checks here. We've got all the details that we need. Nothing's expired. And our passenger count matches our payload count. So at the bottom here, we have review and submit. You can see the inbound or the destination submission is not supported. Even though it's not supported, we did add this tool so that globally you can generate a gen deck for anywhere that you are. Josh, anything to add about this?
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. So I think one of the primary uses for this gen deck tool that I recently discovered on a trip is how handy it is to populate all of this data and be able to hand it over to the handlers. And maybe they don't need a gen deck, but they just need all the passport information, the passenger's full names, date of birth, that sort of thing. And it's perfect to be able to send this right over to the handlers, who are then able to make the inbound or outbound customs forms, pre-fill them, and they're ready to go. So this is super handy, and it's really, really quick to do, especially if you are operating on one of the legs that does support eAPIS, because while at the same time I'm able to file my inbound or outbound, say to the US, I'm probably going to need a gen deck to either arrive or depart at the foreign destination or foreign departure point. So it's sort of, you kind of get to kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, because you are able to hand this off to the handler, who then fills out all your paperwork, and you file the US eAPIS at the same time.
Great, thanks Josh. So again, I'll go ahead and hit save. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is release this flight. So when I hit release, I'll get this release option here. And depending on how your company is configured, you can see on this account, we require that we release these flights as editable. You can, of course, set it the other way if you want to release your flights as read-only, or you can leave the option up to the dispatcher. So we'll go ahead and release the flight. And once we do that, at the bottom here, we're going to get a timestamp. And we can just kind of quickly look along the bottom here. Of course, we didn't file this, but we would have a filing status here. And then we can also take a look at change history. So if I click on view history, this is an audit trail of everything that's happened with this flight. Now, it's pretty much just been me planning in here, but if you had different dispatchers on different days, a scheduling system, a flight service provider in here, you can come in and see every single change that happens. One last thing here along the bottom also is tags. So if you needed to add another tag, like we talked about at the beginning, you can do that too. Now that we've released the flight, we can take a look at the documents that the crew are going to see. So up here at the top right, we have the nav log and the briefing button. If you are using different custom nav logs. You can click the drop down here and choose whichever specific nav log that you want to take a look at. You can also set these as an operational rule. So every time that this aircraft type is flying, they use this special nav log. I generally will just click on the briefing because what that's going to do is generate my nav log at the top and my briefing below. So now we've got our custom briefing here. We've got our custom nav log with our company logo here. You can take a quick look at our operational flight plan. We've got all of our waypoints here. Because this is an ETP flight, we do have the ETP summary here. And then as we scroll down, we have a detailed ETP report. Scrolling down, once we get past the nav log, we have a few additional documents that you can include, like the ICAO flight plan form. And then we get into the briefing. So the first view here, vertical cross-section chart, got a lot of good information on it. And just a few different weather charts, winds, temps, and turbulence at different altitudes. We've got our ETP wind chart, significant weather. We've also got our overflight report, which will give you cost estimates for all of the countries that you're overflying. And then METARs, TAFs, NOTAMs, all of those items that you're used to seeing. We'll also give you a rain prediction report. And then, of course, all of the NOTAMs and normal briefing information that you're used to seeing. All right, so I'm just going to hit save one more time to save my latest changes. And then I'm going to make our next flight. So I can actually carry over a lot of the details from this flight to the next if I know that, my departure is going to be the same, fuel information, the people on board, the crew. So I'll just go ahead and hit next flight. And you can see that Copenhagen is now our departure airport, and I can put in our destination. All right, let's push this out just a little bit later. Choose an alternate. One thing that we didn't have on the previous flight plan, but that we have now, is a flight advisory. So this section is going to show you NOTAMs, airport closures, runway closures, and we can just click right here and see those NOTAMs. Scrolling down, we can go ahead and choose a recommended route. But we can also go straight into the route builder. And for a flight like this is really going to come in handy. Probably for this flight, I think we'll avoid a couple of countries. And we can start with just this constraint and hit generate new route. All right, so we've got our new generated route, and you can see on the map over here, we've actually got, those spaces that we needed to avoid grayed out, and now we can see the route string is going around those. We can also see that it's Eurocontrol valid, but if for some reason it wasn't, or you were having an error, you can always click on validate and come in here and try and figure out what you need to change to get it validated. A couple other tools that I want to show you are up here at the top. If you click on Route Tools, the first thing I want to take a look at is the route report. So this is going to take a look at the Jeppesen Airway Manual, and it's going to look at any relevant airway restrictions that might apply to your route. If you do take a look at these and you see you need to avoid one, you just check the box, avoid the segment, and we'll automatically generate another new route for you. So we've got that new constraint in our valid route there. And one other route tool is the airspace crossings. So this will give you a great view of either the FIRs or the countries that you're overflying. And if you hover, we'll actually show you where those points are on the map. One last thing here in the route builder that we recently added is the profile view. So if you use ForeFlight Mobile, you've probably seen this before, but you do have kind of this side view, and we have a few different layers here: turbulence, icing, temperature, and the wind barbs. And of course, we've also got terrain here. So you can just see this side view. Josh, anything to add?
So a couple of the other constraints that I have found to be pretty useful are the constraints like via waypoint, where there might be a NOTAM that says every aircraft entering this FIR needs to come in via this waypoint. Similarly, we have avoid waypoint, which is equally useful in those cases where we just want to give a little bit of extra room from perhaps a FIR boundary, or another case where we just really don't want to transition outbound via the waypoint due to a NOTAM or that such thing. We also have via track, so if we decide that we want to fly on the North Atlantic tracks, we can do so. We can specify procedures to fly or not fly via the avoid or via star SID track, that sort of thing. And like Caitlin showed, we do have the Jeppesen Airway manual connectivity, so we're able to use avoid airways or partial routes. Again, if there's some FIR restrictions that require us to either not be on an airway or to include perhaps 2 or 3 waypoints as part of the route as we enter an FIR. So I think the route builder is a hugely powerful tool that we have within ForeFlight Dispatch. It's one that I often use when flying internationally because it really gives me the tools that I need to come up with the route that I want.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, there's a ton of awesome constraint options in here that we, definitely don't have the time to cover, but definitely encourage you to check them out. All right, so I'll go ahead and save this flight as well so that I can release it to myself and Josh. So we're going to take a look at these flights on the iPad here in just a minute, but I want to show you a couple of settings first. So if you're an admin on your account, you'll see some options for settings. And first, we just have general, planning settings, kind of customizing the way that you want the briefing to look, the way that you want your data format to look. So there's quite a few options here. We did recently just add some NOTAM filters. So if you want to customize the type of NOTAMs that you'll see in the briefing, you can customize that here. And as Josh mentioned, we do have this weights section, so you can come in here and set your default weights for passengers as well as crew. And then if we move over to auto dispatch, something that is really handy for folks is the auto release tool. So you can turn this on and then you can specify a number. Let's say I always want all my flight plans to be released 24 hours in advance or 8 hours in advance. And that way you can ensure that the crew is getting those flight plans. The big ones I want to talk about, though, are operational rules. So we've mentioned this a couple times in the webinar, but there's a lot of different rules that you can set up. So I'll just go ahead and hit add rule. One that we see a lot, just a simple one. You can either set the condition to be always, or maybe if destination is Teterboro, then always add LaGuardia as the alternate. You can also turn on auto routing as well. So this is just a rule. You can see the rule preview here. If destination is Teterboro, then add alternate LaGuardia with auto routing mode. And now I've got that rule set. So there's a lot of options that you can set. You can set custom nav logs, Afton addresses, remarks, call signs, flight watcher. So there's just a lot of power in here for you to automate your operation. Couple other things. If we move over to the Navlog builder, I'm not going to go through all of the steps here, but just so you can see, you do have the power to customize your operational flight plan. So I recommend just making a copy of one of our existing layouts and then modifying it to your needs. You can definitely add different blocks, lots of different options in here, move them around to be in the order that you like, and just save them. Last thing I want to mention in settings here is People Manager. So we talked about this earlier when we were adding crew. This is going to be the place where you can keep track of your cabin attendants, contract pilots, people who don't need a ForeFlight license. So you can just click Add Person, put in first name, last name, and email address, and you'll see these people showing up in the drop downs in the crew section and around dispatch. So with that, I think we will hop over and take a look at the iPad. Okay, so now we're on the iPad and we're on the Flights tab. So on the left, you can see the 2 flights that we planned today, and you can see a little flag that says Success Group, and that's just telling me that this is shared from my organization. So if we tap on the top flight and we open it up, we can see at the top we've got the nav log and the briefing. We've got those same buttons that we had in dispatch. Same information is there. We've also got the files view where we can have additional attachments. And then as we go down to the first section here, we have the takeoff and landing buttons. So if we tap on takeoff, we can come in here, we can see all of the runway calculations. We can also do them offline. We can tap on the summary at the top right to see exactly the same information that we saw on dispatch. So as we scroll down the flight plan here, we can see all the details that were planned in dispatch. And if our crew makes changes to this flight plan, we can see those in real time back on dispatch as well. So we can see the load section, we can see weight and balance. And if we needed to, depending on your operation, your pilots can go ahead and file that flight plan as well. Once we're ready to go ahead and fly this, what I would do is tap on the Send To button at the top right corner and send it over to the map. And then what we'll see there is our full route right there on the map where we can interact with it, turn on different layers, and we're ready to go. So that concludes our demo for today. I'm going to hand it back to Jay for Q&A.
Thanks, Caitlin. Before we get into Q&A, I want to mention these links that are really useful resources for you to learn more about dispatch. First, ForeFlight.com/dispatch is the perfect place to start. You can learn more about all of the features that we've talked about. Near the top, you'll find a link to the dispatch releases page. That's where you can learn more about the new features that are constantly being added to ForeFlight Dispatch. The second link here will give you all you need to know about the ins and outs of dispatch in the dispatch guide. ForeFlight.com/dispatch-guide is where you can find that. You can also find it within the ForeFlight mobile app. If you go to the Documents tab, click on the ForeFlight drive, and you'll find the dispatch guide. Next, if your organization isn't using ForeFlight Dispatch yet and you want to sign up, you can visit foreflight.com/dispatch-form. Now, this will get you in touch with our sales team and give them the information they need to get the conversation started. Next, you can register for more webinars and watch past ones at foreflight.com/webinars. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, today's presentation will be added to that page within the next 24 hours. And lastly, if you have any questions about Dispatch and what it can do for your operation, or really any questions about a ForeFlight business account, you can reach out to us at sales@foreflight.com. With that, let's move on to some questions. And thank you all so much for the great questions that you've sent in today. The first one that I have is for Caitlin. And this is one thing that we didn't highlight during today's presentation, but it's about the new support tab inside of ForeFlight Dispatch. Can you show us how that works, Caitlin?
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. If we can share my screen. So we've enhanced our support button a little bit. So when you're on the dispatch tab and you click on support here on the left, what it will do is open up a dialog. So one option here on the left is you can go to the dispatch guide, learn more, maybe answer your question. But if you're having an issue, what you can do is click on report an issue. And what we'll do is we'll actually grab a screenshot of wherever you are in dispatch. And then you can use these tools here, mark it up, say we're having a problem right here. And then you can kind of fill out the details. And when you report this issue, it'll go straight to our support team and they can triage it. And just really it's just helping you help us. So we've got more information about your issue, and we can hopefully help you even faster.
That's fantastic. I actually hadn't seen that yet. That is awesome. The next question we got is, can you tell us more about the list of scheduling providers that are supported? And we didn't review the list earlier because it is, quite frankly, it's just pretty long. We have a lot of scheduling providers working with us. So I sent a message to everyone who was in the webinar toward the beginning, but you can go to foreflight.com/dispatch-integrations and see the full list there. But Josh, I was wondering if you could kind of jump in and give us a little bit of background on how these integrations work.
Yes, for sure. So our integrations work through our public API. And for those that are not familiar with what a public API is, that's essentially a way that allows an outsider to access our system, or in this case, to access dispatch programmatically. So what that means is through their app or their interface, they're able to send us, for example, a new flight request, or to add crew to a flight, or add files to a flight, get nav logs, that sort of thing. And so these integrations are supported by us through our API, but they're actually created by the integration partner themselves. So if you'd like to see an integration into ForeFlight Dispatch, the authority for that really is the company that develops the software you'd like us to integrate with, because we do provide the tools currently to allow that integration into ForeFlight Dispatch.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. And while we're on the topic of scheduling providers, someone asked if passenger weights that are entered into their scheduling provider, if those auto-populate into the weight and balance within dispatch.
They absolutely can. So referring back to my answer earlier, where the integration provider or the software that you want to integrate with us through, if they send us that data, that's something that we're capable of ingesting and putting right into the dispatch weight and balance, performance, that sort of thing. So if it's sent from your software that's integrating with us, it's something that we can do. But again, it's something that is controlled by that software and not us. But natively, we do support getting that data into our system and using it where appropriate.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. The next question is for Caitlin. The adequate airports that you showed earlier, can those filters be saved in the settings as a default?
They absolutely can. Jay, can we share my screen again? Great. So I went over here to settings. And then if I go to operational rules, like we talked about earlier, I'll just add a new rule. We just recently added this. So we have adequate airport filters, and we can set auto select, and you can set all the filters that you want. And again, you can see the rule preview. So we'll automatically select based on those filters, just like that.
Awesome. Josh, the next question I have is for you. Is the runway analysis data that ForeFlight uses, is that proprietary to ForeFlight, or is it derived from some other source?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So our data is internally created. We do source our data from the OEMs, but as far as obstacle data and terrain data, that is sourced through various resources. And from there, we also generate internally our engine out procedures. So our engine out procedures and our terrain obstacle data is in fact in-house created and in-house processed, and the aircraft data comes from the OEM and processed by us.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. And if you're interested in learning more about runway analysis, Josh and one of our other colleagues did a webinar. I guess it's been several months now, but on an entire webinar just on that topic. You can find that at foreflight.com/webinars. Caitlin, the next question is for you. Can you show how to efficiently adjust routes that don't pass Eurocontrol validation within ForeFlight?
Yeah, let's share my screen one more time.
You got it.
So I'm back into one of the flights that we planned, and I do already have Eurocontrol validation, but the way that you would do this if you were getting invalid for some reason is you would go into the route builder. Let me tuck away the profile view here. And then right here in the route section, you've got this validate button. So you could come in here and modify this and then just continue to hit validate until you get that Eurocontrol validation.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. Josh, I think we are to the last question, and I'll give it to you. Can you talk about the briefing package that's generated by ForeFlight Dispatch versus the one that you get in ForeFlight Mobile, and are they different or are they the same?
That's another great question. So if you have a dispatch license on your account, then the briefing that you get from ForeFlight Mobile and the briefing that you receive from Dispatch will be identical. If you don't have a dispatch license on your account, then the briefing that you receive from ForeFlight Mobile may be a little bit different than what you get from Dispatch. To expand on that briefly, in Dispatch, we expose a settings section that allows the customer to customize the briefing. So you can turn certain functions on and off, whereas ForeFlight Mobile doesn't have that option. So ForeFlight Mobile, what you see is what you get, but once you add a dispatch license, any settings you have for the briefing in Dispatch will also flow down to ForeFlight Mobile.
Great. Thank you, Josh. And thank you, Caitlin, as well. And for all of you coming today, really appreciate it. I just want to go over these links one last time. You can learn more about Dispatch at these 3 links here at the top, foreflight.com/dispatch/dispatch-guide, or within ForeFlight, within the app, you can find the Dispatch Guide as well. If you aren't using ForeFlight Dispatch yet and you want to sign up and just really talk to our sales team about how you can get started, see if it'll work for your organization, you can visit foreflight.com/dispatch-form. And like I mentioned earlier, that'll just give our sales team the information they need to make sure that they can get the conversation started. The video from this presentation and all of our other webinars are at foreflight.com/webinars. The video from today will be there in the next 24 hours. And you can always reach our sales team at sales@foreflight.com. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for coming today, and we'll see you on the next webinar.